Hello, good morning, and welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?
Well, it's 28 degrees Celsius here in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. Good morning and welcome to the program. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
You know, we need some temperature in this country because...
some cool temperature.
By the time you sleep and you get up in the morning, there's a barrage of all kinds of matters. You know, just on every side you turn, there's something going on. It just looks as if people are queuing up, or government agencies are queuing up to have their own share of any kind of activity to harass the people, intimidate the people, take advantage of the people. Almost like everybody's waiting for everyone at every point you turn.
Chamberlain, I'm doing my best not to sing this famous Lagbaja song. Kila wa she, shejo la wa fa yigbo. It's you do your best every day not to descend into cynicism, not to descend into despair. Because when you look at the kinds of stories that makes the rounds on a daily basis and the things that we listen to on this program and even behind the scenes, especially behind the scenes on this program, you do everything you can to say, no, I refuse to give up on this country. This is the only one I have, and it's got to get better.
Sometimes when you see the book, The Theory and Practice of Journalism, you say, no, there's a lot missing in those books. They don't, especially if it's got to be the Nigerian version. There's so many areas that they leave off those books, and so it's not exactly what you see. Mental health issues, several areas. For instance, now, there's this viral video that's making the rounds about in Lagos, one of the scenarios in Lagos, by the way. So this particular one, I'm sure many might have seen that. Well, in case...
nípa máa gbà púfà fún sólà ibi tẹ́ bá ti wá ẹjọ́ ń bọ̀ lọ́fíìsì yín.
Agents of Lagos State government who just approached them trying to get clarification concerning solar. So yes, the Lagos State government responded to that now viral solar installation incident, which is raising more questions than it answers. And frankly, it exposes a deeper policy confusion that risks stifling innovation at a time Nigeria can least afford it. Let's be clear. Yes, governments have a duty to regulate structural changes in shared housing, because they say that is a shared housing scheme. It's not for all residents or private residents in Lagos, only for those in those areas. That's not in dispute, but what we're seeing here is something else entirely. An approach that appears heavy-handed, poorly communicated, and dangerously out of step with not even global realities, our present realities in this country. This is not just about permits. It's about getting power supply. It's about power, literally and figuratively, I might add. In a country where we're battling chronic electricity shortages, where citizens are forced to find alternatives just to survive, the idea that officials will confront residents over installing solar panels, it sends the wrong signal. It may be well intended. It suggests that the system is more interested in control than in enabling solutions. And the Lagos State government's defense, they say this applies only to social housing residents. But that argument opens up an even bigger loophole. If the policy is so clear, why did it take a viral video for the clarification to emerge? Where is the transparency? Where is the public-facing guideline that clearly spells out what residents can and cannot do? Because regulation without visibility quickly becomes harassment. Now compare this with what obtains internationally. Say, okay, UK, close. Many go there every now and then. For example, most residential solar installations there fall under what they call permitted development. And that means homeowners, even tenants, in many cases can install solar panels without needing complex approvals, as long as basic safety and structural standards are met. A system is designed to encourage adoption, not frustrate it. Across Europe, for instance, governments are not just allowing solar, they are subsidizing it, fast-tracking approvals, and in some cases, mandating it for new buildings. Why? Because energy independence is now a national priority. But here, we're still debating whether a man needs bureaucratic clearance to escape darkness, but we know how some of these things go. Even if they tell you, oh, this is supposed to go for everybody's common good. We've been here before. Even if Lagos is right on the technicality of structural alteration, the execution is deeply flawed. First, there's no evidence of a streamlined digital approval system. If residents must navigate layers of ministry approvals just to install solar, then the process itself becomes a deterrent. Second, the issue of fees. What exactly are residents even paying for? Is this safety, inspection, structural assessment, or simply another administrative bottleneck? Third, enforcement optics matter. Sending officials to confront residents without prior engagement or education only fuels distrust. If I could say this for a minute, even if they wanted to enforce some of these things, I mean, in some other areas they have homeowners association, you have offices that are regulating all of this. It's right there in that vicinity. If they see anything going on wrong, they could just point out to you, this. But even if Lagos really wants to position itself as a forward-thinking megacity, then its policies must reflect that ambition. Here's what we think should happen next. Clear, publicly accessible guidelines must be published, simple, direct, and impossible to misinterpret. Approvals, where necessary, should be digitized and time-bound. No Nigerian should wait weeks to install basic energy infrastructure. If they exist, talking about the fees now, it should be transparent, minimal, and tied to strictly to safety inspections, not revenue generation. As we see with most agencies in this country, it's always for revenue generation. And most importantly, let me just anchor on this point. Solar adoption should be actively encouraged, not policed. Incentives, not intimidation, should define the government's approach to this. That's what I think.
You know, Chamberlain, I'm even afraid that showing this video, while we're trying to highlight what the Lagos State government has done wrong, even though it's come out with a statement to say this is a structural alteration and so he should get a permit. I'm just hoping that it's not giving other states ideas. And I hope that they're not copying the wrong things. Because, I mean, let us be very honest. Nigerians have been tried and tested. We have shown our resilience in many different ways. And I believe that when we find solutions to problems that government over the years have failed to resolve, I think that we need to be praised. We need to be encouraged. As you rightly highlighted, fees for solar panels should be subsidized. And we don't know that that is something that I think even the federal government has been looking to do. I mean, we know that right now EVs, for instance, electric vehicles, there are no import duties for things like that. So why should the state government now say that you need to pay because you live in a social housing system, for you to be able to put up solar panels? As has been highlighted, was it communicated before now? Or what exactly is the path that are all the residents in that estate aware that they must put up, they must pay fees, or that this is a structural adjustment according to the rules guiding social housing? Enough said on this. I just hope that Lagos, not just Lagos State, but other state governments do not copy the wrong thing. So do not get ideas. This is not the way to go. You cannot build houses and now tell people that for them to get sustainable power, they will have to pay you to put up power that you are not providing. That cannot be the way to go. Certainly not.
Yeah, so we're hoping that at least some of these things will be corrected as fast as possible. Well, yesterday was a lot in terms of what the courts had to grapple with, but we'll take a look at this highlight and we'll take it from there.
The Turaki-led group of the People's Democratic Party and the leadership of the African Democratic Congress under former Senate President Mr. David Mark are at the apex court in their quest to determine the group that should represent the party at the 2027 general elections. Counsels in the appeals and other supporters converge on the Supreme Court for the day's hearings. They exchange pleasantries. The first appeal to be heard is from the Tanimu Turaki-led National Working Committee of the People's Democratic Party, who emerged from the Ibadan Convention. The appellant, through their team of lawyers led by Mr. Chris Uche, is asking the court to dismiss a cross-appeal lodged against them by another group from the party. The council is also asking the justice to grant their appeal, seeking to reverse the appeal court judgment that nullified the Ibadan National Convention. Meanwhile, a former governor of Jigawa State, Mr. Sule Lamido, and the other group of the party led by Abdurrahman Mohammed, who are represented by Mr. Joseph Daudu, filed preliminary objections seeking a dismissal of the appeal. Next is the appeal by the leadership of the African Democratic Congress. The party's counsel, Mr. Jibril Nukutekpa, is arguing that no court has jurisdiction to entertain cases bordering on internal affairs of political parties. He adds that the court lacks jurisdiction to entertain any legal action on the internal matters of the party. However, counsel to Nafiu Gombe, Mr. Robert Emupero, urged the Apex Court to reject the appeal and affirm the judgment of the lower court, which held that the case of the appellant was premature and dismissed it. Both parties had approached the Supreme Court to nullify the decisions of the Court of Appeal on different grounds.
Well, yes, so as you all know now, Nigeria's Apex Court, the Supreme Court, they reserved judgment in two high-profile political disputes involving the ADC and the PDP cases. And they strike at the heart of party leadership, internal democracy, and the limits of judicial intervention in political affairs. Now, while one appeal questions whether the courts can even entertain disputes arising from party leadership, tussles, and other challenges, the nullification of National Convention conducted in defiance of a subsisting court order, with judgment now pending, it is important for us to emphasize here now that what we're trying to do is not intended to preempt the decision of the courts, nor to endorse or oppose the prayers before it. Rather, the objective today is just to expressly explain the issues, legal questions, and processes that have led these matters before the courts, purely to aid public understanding. And so to dissect these legal and constitutional questions, we're joined by Mr. Monday Obani, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, from our studios in Lagos. Good morning. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you, Chamberlain, for having me. Maokwe, good morning also.
Good morning to you, Mr. Obani. If I may lead the questioning, I'd like to ask you, what exactly does it mean? And I know that we've heard this over and over again. I'm sure a lot of people are curious. What exactly does it mean when the Supreme Court say they reserve judgment in a matter?
Yeah, very simple. If a matter has been copiously hired, I mean, you file your processes, and the court give you a clear date for hearing. And after having heard from you, ordinarily the court will give you a date for judgment. But when it said that a judgment is reserved, there is no definite date, but that issue of date will be communicated later. So when a judgment is reserved, it means that it is adjourned for judgment, but the specific date is actually unknown. It can be today, it can be tomorrow. So they have reserved judgment in order to deliver judgment after you have exhausted, whatever you have filed, in terms of maybe oral amplification or adoption of your written brief. The court will now say we have reserved judgment, meaning we are postponing judgment to a later date, but the date is clearly unknown. It can be today, it can be in an hour's time. The communication will be done by the registrar of the court and say, come, and then, of course, listen to the judgment of the court. So that's what it means in simple terms.
Thank you for explaining that. I think the second question will be why? Why do they reserve judgment? Because I'm sure that you've heard all manner of whisperings behind the scenes as to why this happens. Can you tell us why this happens within the jurisdiction of the courts?
Of course, after you have heard the parties, I was in court last Tuesday, If the councils have filed their brief, I'm sure that Tuesday, they would have adopted those briefs that day, pending judgment. But unfortunately, the briefs were not filed. So the court gave yesterday as the date they will now listen to all parties. Gave them a deadline, Monday, for them to file all their processes, which is actually what happened. They finished filing their processes, and then yesterday was for argument. The court need to study what they have actually written and then said in oral amplification before writing judgment. So they can't just immediately enter into it. It is a constitutional issue, as Chamberlain has actually pointed out. Very grave constitutional issue that requires proper appraisal, looking at what the issues are and then making a pronouncement. Because again, the issue of jurisprudence is key. It is already an established fact that on issue of internal matters of the political parties, the court, as far back as in the 80s, have laid it down that, look, the courts do not interfere in matters that are considered internal. But over time, exceptions, grew. That if what you are coming to court to argue has to do with breach either of your internal rules or your guidelines or your constitution or even the Constitution of Federal Republic of Nigeria or the Electoral Act, the court will actually listen to that person who has come to court for issue of grievance, to be redressed. So over time, they now make it a statutory provision. Even the current Electoral Act also has it in Section 83, that you do not interfere in internal affairs of the political parties, except, and those note grounds were actually properly specified. The Act even went further to now impose punishment on lawyers who come to court over matters that are clearly regarded as internal affairs of the political parties. I think that the lawyer will be asked to pay 10 million, not even the litigant. A lawyer who accepts a brief that has to do with internal affairs of a political party and who comes to court to ventilate a matter that is purely an internal affair of the political party will be asked to pay fine now. And lawyers are arguing whether that is not denial of access. But it's a different ballgame entirely. What we're saying is that issue that will be determined is very grave constitutional issues. So they need to take time, look at what parties have filed, and then give the judgment that will satisfy the aspiration and yearning of all the parties that are before the court.
So on that particular point, the appellants clearly relying on that long-standing principle, courts not interfering in internal affairs of political parties. Shouldn't there be a place where a line should be drawn? And where should it be?
That's a very intelligent question. As I said earlier, it is now, there is an enactment that says any matter that has to do with issue of governance structure, issue of nomination, issue of discipline, and all the rest thing that has to do with internal affairs of the political party, they are non-justiciable. It is now in the Electoral Act. Now, the same act now went further to say, look, if the person that is actually coming to court to ventilate his grievance is now saying that the political party itself has actually breached their own constitution or the constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria or in their electoral guideline or even the Electoral Act, then where there is a wrong, there is a remedy. The court will still have to come in order to look at the grievance of that party that has come before it in order to determine whether he is right in what he has said or what he has not said. Because it's not a blanket thing that if it's an internal affairs matter of the political party, then the court will run away. The court will look at the writ of summons, or the processes in order to discover what the party is complaining about. If he's saying that there are wrongs that have been committed in breach of clear enactment, statutory enactment, then the court will interfere and look at it, holistically and determine whether such grievance should be redressed. So we need to understand that is not issue that if you say it's an internal affairs of the political party, then the court will run away. The court will look at what has been brought to really know whether it is purely an internal matter that does not require interference of the court. And they have specified them. If it has to do with nomination, issue of who is the leadership issue of governance of the political party, issue of discipline, you don't go to court to go and debate those issues. These are clearly internal affairs of the political party. It shouldn't come and disturb the court. It's non-justiciable. But if what you are saying is that in that process of nomination, the political party has even breached their own rules, their own law, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that says this man is not qualified to run, then the court will have to look at it and take a decision one way or the other. These are clearly, what we need to explain to Nigerians, concerning this is issue of internal affairs. Of course, that was established in, I think it was either Ono and Okafor, by the Supreme Court, and over time, even Turaki, and all that, and Dahatu, and several other authorities have actually aligned themselves to that particular decision. The internal affairs of the political party is non-justiciable, except, and I have already specified those exceptions, if there is a breach, then the court will have to interfere.
In the case of the ADC, which appears a little tricky, because, there are several narratives why some people thought, in the first place, when the court even said, just come and explain to us why we shouldn't take certain steps, and then there was that appeal. So questions concerning why did they even need to appeal? If they didn't appeal at that point, where would the matter have been now? Because this is not even a substantive matter. So even if they determine this matter, what's going to happen to the main matter of the ADC itself? So could you explain that build-up, how they even got to the point where the court now spoke about status quo ante bellum?
Yeah, Chamberlain, again, this is a very brilliant question. And people need to know actually what happened in ADC. I was in Supreme Court last Tuesday when this matter also was being debated until it was adjourned to yesterday. What happened in ADC matter is that the leadership issue came up, with Bala Nafina Bala, who said he was supposed to be the chairman or acting chairman of the party in the absence of the substantive chair, who resigned. And that the leadership that eventually emerged was not in accordance with the constitution of the party. So he went to Federal High Court in Abuja, I think before Justice Mwite. Mwite now asked all the parties, that were respondent in the case to come and show cause why he will not grant the restraining order. In my own thinking, I thought that the ADC should have gone to tell the court, this is a matter that is non-justiciable. This is a matter of abrogating and reprobating. This is a man who has allegedly resigned, so what is he coming to court to do? Or tell the court at least the court lacks jurisdiction. But they chose going on appeal, and I don't know what they were appealing against. But so when they got to Court of Appeal considered that appeal as being incompetent, premature. The matter is before the lower court, and they're asking you to show cause, and you're coming to Court of Appeal. So go back to the Federal High Court, and respond to whatever query. They have not taken a decision against you. They're asking you come and show cause why we should not take this decision. And the only problem in that case is that if the court now dismisses that appeal based upon the fact that it was incompetent, this issue of making an order of maintaining status quo ante bellum, which has actually brought the confusion, in the entire process. I don't know whether it was absolutely necessary, but this is what the Supreme Court now will eventually decide in this matter. They made that order. So ADC has further now appealed on that interlocutory decision to Supreme Court. And it is a matter that is a bit dicey, but I know there may be steps that the Supreme Court may take in order to resolve all this issue. One of which is under the Section 22 of the Supreme Court Act. The Supreme Court can assume jurisdiction as if that this case is originally filed before the Supreme Court and determine this matter in its entirety without referring the matter back to the Federal High Court. It can't do that because the law allows that global power to the Supreme Court. In a matter like this, that there is a sense of urgency, is in the interest of the public, that this matter be hastily disposed of in order to actually put the polity, in stability.
If I could just follow up on that,
but let me
before
finish,
you move on to your next point.
Okay.
It's just on this same clarification. I hope you don't lose your train of thought on this one.
Okay.
If, according to the rules of the court, they can assume original jurisdiction on this kind of matter, under what circumstance? You hear you lawyers always say, look, the court is not Father Christmas. They don't give you what you don't ask. If the appellants don't ask, can the Supreme Court, on its own, assume that jurisdiction, even though perhaps they will say, considering the time frame that we've got on these electoral matters?
They may have asked. I heard a bit of it of saying, you know, issue of jurisdiction can be raised at any time. You can raise it even for the first time at the Supreme Court. So if they are raising the issue of jurisdiction now, and again, as I said earlier, those processes must be in the file. And it must show that there is not going to be any necessity of a witness, you know, giving evidence. Because if it's a hostile issue that requires evidence, of course, the Supreme Court cannot assume jurisdiction over such matter because it's a final court. It does not take witnesses. So it is important that the issue is one that can be resolved without a witness coming to come and give evidence. So that is where. So there are also conditions for the Supreme Court assuming that global, you know, jurisdiction. We talk about the power to now decide the matter as if it was filed for the first time before the Supreme Court. So those conditions must be fulfilled before the Supreme Court can do that. But if issue of jurisdiction is raised by ADC, maybe the Supreme Court can say, yes, let's look at the issue of, did the court below have jurisdiction in the first place? They can determine that. These are options. I'm not saying that the Supreme Court may take that procedure, but it is in the interest of the public, even Nigeria, and even for the survival of our democracy, for Supreme Court now being a court of, you know, policy, to look at this particular matter, looking at the timeline in, you know, concerning the electoral, you know, process entirely, to say, let's have this matter finally disposed of at the Supreme Court level, without referring this matter back to Federal High Court, because it's a process. Going to Federal High Court again, look at the timeline of the timetable for the nomination of candidates and all that. So it is something that the Supreme Court can, you know, provided the condition, you know, is met. That is a matter that they have all the papers, everything that has been filed, and then it can be disposed of without any without any witness, you know, coming into the matter, because Supreme Court is not a court that, you know, hear witnesses. They don't listen to witnesses and all that. So if that condition is fulfilled, they can dispose of this matter finally, because the matter that is before the Supreme Court in ADC is interlocutory. The substance of the matter is still pending at Justice Nwite's court, who say, come and explain why. And then they are saying, look, it is an internal matter, but you didn't go to court to tell that court that clearly is an internal matter. You didn't file any paper to that effect. Then you went to Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal said, go back to court of, you know, lower court, and decide, let that decision be taken. Then you are now in Supreme Court. So I think the Supreme Court, you could see the sense of urgency, you could see the sense to do justice, you could see the sense to stabilize the polity by assuming jurisdiction over this matter and even giving them a date, you know, for the matter to be heard in an expeditious manner, which is what the Supreme Court has done. Kudos to Supreme Court. But I also probably beg that they can probably go further to dispense this matter completely at the Supreme Court level if all the conditions are met. If the conditions are met, they can finally decide this matter and then let there be some level of rest, because everyone's heart is clearly in their mouth, you know, concerning this matter.
I think we can go back to the issue of confidence, because that's another issue that, you know, will clearly come to the fore in this matter. We've seen over the years political matters are things that a lot of people have a lot of interest in. People are wondering which way for our democracy. And certainly you are aware that, you know, whatever it is, whatever decision their lordships reach on this matter will have grave implications for the 2027 elections and, well, maybe not just the 2027 elections, but our democracy at large. So how confident are you that our Supreme Court, and in short, the entire judiciary, is still capable of holding the confidence of the Nigerian people, especially as we go into the 2027 elections? Again,
this is a brilliant question. I think we need to sustain our confidence on our judiciary. It remains the last hope of the common man. If you see the interest the Supreme Court has shown in this matter, giving them, you know, say, look, if you have filed your processes that last week, we are ready to have this matter, disposed of, So that shows sense of urgency. They also read newspapers. They are part of the polity. They are citizens of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and I'm sure they want a situation where our democracy will not be imperiled. They are interested in the stability of the nation. And so I have this absolute confidence, one, as a lawyer, secondly, as a citizen, and then as a senior member of the bar. I don't have any doubt that the Supreme Court will do justice to this particular matter and ensure that we stabilize the polity and then there is no confusion anywhere, even as we head towards 2027. It's a critical decision, that will determine the health of our democracy. It's very important, and I think they take it serious too, because I personally went to court to see, the feeling, the urgency, the way the matter is being handled by the Supreme Court, and I must tell you that I was satisfied with the posture, that I saw. And I know that this matter will be determined in no distant time so that we can have peace and continue with the electoral process of 2027. I have no doubt in terms of confidence that they will do justice to this matter and determine the matter in such a manner that Nigerians will be very satisfied.
Well, we look forward to that. I think we also look forward, I mean, we are unsure what the decisions will reach, and we're hoping that the parties that have taken the matter to court, yes, whether this is in their favor or isn't, I'm hoping that they will be able to take it in good faith. Because oftentimes, what we see is that when the Supreme Court, or any court at all, rules in their favor, then they say, oh, the court is the last hope of the common man, and indeed they've come to the rescue of the common man. But when it doesn't work in their favor, they are also the first to cast aspersions,
yeah, it's
which,
very important,
of course,
yes,
chips away at the credibility of our courts.
Yes, it's important we say this. It is what you bring before the court that the court will decide on. The court is not a Father Christmas. The court does not operate on sentiment. It's very important because most times we see sentiment flying about, especially when issues that are politically charged cases come before the court. Whatever you have filed is what the court will look at and decide on that particular matter. It's very important we point out that. And what the court is about to decide concerning these two cases is issue of internal affairs of the political party. Does it exist? If it does exist, are there exceptions? And these cases, do they meet those exceptions? It's important we narrow these issues so that people will not, expect the court now to play a role that is beyond the jurisdiction of the court. The court will decide based upon what you have filed. Is there issue at all? Is this matter internal affairs of the political party? If it is internal affairs of the political party that does not require interference of the court, was the court below right to have interfered? If the court below was right, the court also will say it. So I don't see any complication in this matter. It's very straightforward. And I know that the Supreme Court will be in a position to do justice to this matter. So, but if you didn't file anything that the court will decide upon, it will not go outside what you have filed in order to decide a different thing entirely for you. It's very important that these things are pointed out.
Well, without asking you to predict the outcome of these cases,
yes,
what would you say are the key legal principles the Supreme Court of Nigeria will prioritize in resolving these kind of matters?
For PDP case, it's very straightforward because, there was hearing, from beginning, so the issues are narrowed. There was a convention, and somebody went to court and said that convention shouldn't hold because the congresses that should produce the delegates to the convention were not properly conducted. So that is his allegation, So the lower court already made an order, the Court of Appeal approved, and now we are before the Supreme Court. So was the convention properly held? The congresses that produced an order, so the court will determine, and then their own argument is, look, this matter is purely an internal affairs of the political party. So does this particular case qualify? So it's narrowed down because from beginning, the issues, started from the lowest court to Court of Appeal, now to Supreme Court. But in the case of ADC, it's not as easy as that. Because in the case of ADC, the lowest court said, come and tell me why I should not restrain you from acting or for being the leader of that political party. But they chose to come to Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal said, no, this is premature, it's incompetent, go back to the lower court. So they now made an order, that strange order that is actually now the crux of the matter before the Supreme Court. Status quo ante bellum. These are Latin maxims that have created so much confusion. In whose favor? At what point is the status quo to be maintained? So these are issues. This is an ambiguous issue that the Supreme Court will give clarity to in that decision. But again, whether the Supreme Court now will now assume jurisdiction and say, okay, let's do this particular matter and dispose it as if it is filed before us, in the light of what they are saying, that it is an internal affairs of the political party that shouldn't have, involved the court at all. The court shouldn't even have listened to it. Maybe we have not yet come to the level where we begin to shift, look at cases when it is being filed and say, oh, this is this is an internal affairs, and say, don't file it. But the moment it's filed, and the court now is assigned to a judge, the judge will first of all determine whether he has jurisdiction. It is for you to tell the court that he has no jurisdiction. The court cannot, unless so much most times, say, okay, I don't have jurisdiction. But you have to come and tell the court most times that it does not have jurisdiction. This matter is non-justiciable, before it can now make a decision. But in that case, that is not what happened. They went to Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal made a pronouncement that they felt was wrong. They have now proceeded on interlocutory appeal to Supreme Court. So whether the Supreme Court will assume jurisdiction now and handle this matter holistically and deal with it, it's a different ball game. It should be a prayer point for ADC. ADC should pray that the Supreme Court will come to that level of taking over. So, okay, let's determine this matter, whether it's an internal matter of the political party that shouldn't have involved the court and all that. Just like Justice Lifu, I think it's either Justice Lifu or one other judge somewhere in Nasarawa has now said that it's an internal affair that he struck out the matter completely and all that. There was a particular federal high court that did that recently. So whether the Supreme Court will do that now, assume jurisdiction and determine that matter once and for all, let ADC now be in a prayer mood in order to see whether that can happen.
Priorities, that's your call there. So as we wind down on this one, we know the clock is ticking because the timetable is already out. Parties have to conduct their primaries. Some of them are fixed 15th, 16th, 17th of next month and things like that. So assuming perhaps maybe the court doesn't decide on these matters within the time frame as required by the electoral, by INEC, are there possible circumstances wherein if it's decided beyond the requisite time, it becomes academic? Or if it's decided beyond that time, will it be the nature of the decision that can ask or make INEC alter its timetable?
I think the Electoral Act itself has provided a timeline for all this. And whatever INEC is fixing is based upon what the Act itself has provided. They have extended the timeline. They have looked at the Act and said, okay, this can be accommodated. So I don't know whether there is more accommodation, based upon what INEC has done. But I tell you this, the justices of the Supreme Court, judges in the country, they all listen to newspapers, they listen to television, they also know what is going on in the country. And they know the urgency that is attached to these cases, and they want to dispose of it, So that urgency, sense of urgency is there. And I don't think they would want to take a decision that would become pure academic. They want to, these are life issues, and they want to dispose of it in a manner that parties will know their rights and liabilities, before the convention, before the nomination closes. So I'm not in the one of those that will be thinking that the Supreme Court will not be mindful of this timeline and decide this matter in a manner that is expeditious.
All right, Mr. Monday Obani, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Well, we will be back in a moment. We've got another item, or several other matters, which we'll discuss in just a moment. Stay on with us. Welcome back. Well, in an earlier appearance on the same program, our next guest made a bold and specific projection that Mr. Taiwo Ijele would replace Mr. Wale Edun as finance minister. But that has now come to pass. So following the latest cabinet reshuffle, which you all know. But today he joins us to discuss what the change means for Nigeria's economic direction and what it signals a shift in fiscal strategy. Beyond that, we'll also get his perspective on emerging developments involving INEC, particularly around its reported independent investigations into social media activity, as well as the deepening political and legal conundrum within the ADC and the PDP. Well, joining us now is Dalwa Konde, host of Inside Sources and former presidential aide. Good morning, thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, good to see you guys again.
You know, when we say inside sources, we actually mean inside sources. I don't know what you make of that, but
okay. All right, many would have said, well, maybe you had to pull the string to get that detail. But yes, that was done. But it was yesterday as well. I think we saw a clarification from presidency that he actually tendered his resignation, not that he was sacked. Right. As many outlets are also put out there that he was. But so, what do you have for us now?
Well, I think to take it from your last point, I think it was a little bit too late for the presidential statement to say that he was not sacked. Now, normally, the announcement of of what happens in the president's cabinet should come from the presidential spokesperson. So if you read the statement that came out from the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, whoever wrote that statement was summarizing the memo that led to the removal of those two ministers, whoever drafted that statement from the
memo that was sent.
The memo that the president approved that those two cabinet members should leave. The guy who wrote that statement took it from there, which is not normally the right thing to do, because an internal memo of government is meant for internal consumption. There are some information there that is not designed for the public, and that is where the confusion arose. I mean, I had asked the question that Mr. Bayo Ononuga ought to be the one to come out and tell us that this is what has happened, and to set the narrative that it is a resignation. But that statement from the office of the SGF didn't say that it's a resignation. It said that they will be leaving the cabinet, which is, and then it talks about issues.
So it left room for interpretation.
Yes, and even was talking about where the government wants to do synergy and all kind of stuff, which indicates that something is wrong. So Mr. Ononuga was just trying to do catch up. You know, what ought to have happened is that he ought to be the one to tell us what happened, a big issue. That way, there wouldn't be need for catch-up. But what is very clear is that everybody who watches the Villa closely has seen the tea leaves that, look, Mr. Edun was going to have to go.
Yeah, but I mean, one would have also said that he too would have seen those leaves. The question was why he did not take it when it could easily have been explained as a resignation. Not now, when he's now also been, well, I don't want to say pushed out. That's what that is coming to my mind, because now they are saying, no, it was not pushed out, was not forced to leave. But this has happened alongside another minister, the Minister of Housing, who hasn't said anything. He has not clarified whether he too resigned, because we do know that there was a window given for people who wanted to resign from the president's cabinet. To resign, you know, exactly, and do politics. So we do not know if the Minister for Housing, for instance, falls within that particular category. But this is where we are right now. So isn't it too late in the day for all of this clarifications and non-clarifications, especially when you're reading things like the insider gist that the cable, for instance, was given in terms of what the sins of Mr. Edun were?
Well, you know, so yeah, I think the presidential spokesperson is playing catch up. I think he also indicated that the housing minister also left, you know, made a resignation, you know, according to him. So probably we don't know why, but I don't want to go into the details of what happens, because, you know, I don't really think it's going to help the public interest. You know, so I would like to divulge some of the things that, you know, because it's not really, it is not inspiring at times. You know, it's no use talking so much about them. What is important is, so what is going to happen next?
Yeah, but some people will say we have to understand the past to know what is going to happen next. Yeah. Especially some of the things that we're hearing from the cable. I don't know if you read that report yesterday.
Yeah, well, there's a report from the cable, there's a report from Premium Times, and there's also a report from Empowered Newswire. There are, you know, so everybody has a little bit
of everything. So maybe if we piece all of that together, we can understand what exactly is happening. So if we read all of those reports and we piece everything together, we do know that trouble is not over, so to speak, and that the new man on the block also has his work cut out for him. Will he be able to manage all of this competing interests effectively? So that's why we need to know if indeed there was any truth to some of these things that we have heard behind the scenes.
You know, I mean, Mr. Ononuga, we have to be the one to come and tell us categorically what happened. Please don't forget that I'm a journalist at this point.
You're a journalist.
I can't.
And you are our inside sources journalist.
You know, I mean, what I know is that the president made up his mind, you know, at least, you know, a couple months back, you know, and did ask Mr. Edun to step aside. You even told him that, look, so that I can take care of your health, you know. But he wasn't pretty much ready to leave at that time, because some of the things that is happening behind the scenes is that you have a number of younger technocrats who the president have come to depend on. you know, and Mr. Oyedele is one of them. You know, the other one, just for, you know, is Mr. Zach. You know, Adedeji. I mean, the president depends on those two people very, very much. And if you look at their work, both of them, you won't be surprised that the president is really, you know, leaning on them. Now, that didn't go down well with Edun, who was the Minister of Finance, who is actually the longer ally of the president. So over the years, as a matter of fact, there has been conflict between, you know, what the younger technocrats are saying and what Edun wanted to do. You know, people don't know a lot of that. But so that is where we figured out that, look, this thing is going to have to give, because for the most part, the president was listening to Zach and Oyedele more than he was listening to Edun. So you could tell when Oyedele was then taken to the Ministry of Finance that clearly, you know, that is the direction that the president is going. That is enough that I think the public needs to understand. There are a lot of other details that I don't think is ennobling enough for us to even repeat.
Ennobling. Ennobling is a very interesting word to use in this circumstance. I'm just a little curious. I'm sure the public is also curious. As you rightly highlighted, is the president's long-term ally. He's been in the cabinet of the president for, interestingly, I think when he even served there, he resigned at some point. But he worked with the president. When the president took office, assumed office, he was already working behind the scenes. And the president, you know, expressed every confidence in him that with people like you here, he mentioned his name specifically, and he wasn't even Minister of Finance at that time, you know. And he not just made him Minister of Finance, he made him coordinating Minister of the Economy. That is how much confidence he reposed in him. So there'll be questions as to what exactly went wrong. You know, and these are legitimate questions.
Of course, without a doubt. I mean, and don't forget also that in the presidential system, people, they serve at the pleasure of the president, you know. So in the presidential system, the president can just wake up and say, "Okay, please just go home."
And just wake up
and and
tell a long-time ally.
Yeah, well, I think that the relationship between Mr. Tinubu and Mr. Edun is still going to continue. I can say that much. It's not something that is messy, you know. Of course, there is a little bit of tension and irritation. You know, I think it was the cable that pointed out that Mr. Edun's birthday was missed, you know, by the presidency, you know, which has been issuing birthday. Yeah, you know, I mean,
how could it miss a long-term
you know, so that just tells you of some of the little tension that is there. But I don't think the relationship is going to be that really battered or wrecked necessarily. I don't think so. You know, just like you said, Mr. Edun had left also when he was commissioner. He didn't go all the way through. And there are also indications that he's actually, he needs to pay more attention to his health. So, you know, the president just felt that, look, I need to push my agenda forward, and I want to follow these younger chaps.
Yeah, let's go to the people who are currently there now. I mean, Mr. Oyedele has his work cut out for him. He's now taking the reins as Minister of Finance, and it's unsure whether he's also taking that role as coordinating Minister of the Economy. We don't know if he also has that, but
it's public. It's also the Minister for Coordinating Economy. I think it's there in the statement of this year.
Okay, so let's go with that. I can't get my hand on the statement now, but this is what we have. We're in an election year, and we know that the election year is not exactly a year known for great fiscal discipline. It's a year when oftentimes the budget is not implemented, and we've seen even when we should have had issues with we should have had, you know, substantial implementation of the budget. We've seen now that we're now going into 2026 with 2025's budget. We have to implement it to a certain extent and before we now start to implement, or maybe they're going to be implemented concurrently, particularly the recurrent expenditure part of the 2026 budget. But this is where we are now. What do you think he really and then you have a lot of people, contractors, who are complaining we've not been paid. You have ministries, departments and agencies saying they've only been able to get a little fraction of, you know, what has been budgeted to them. People have been lobbying, and it's really unclear what the country's finances are. We know we've been borrowing a lot of money. That is something that we all know. So for you, where do you think he really has the bulk of work to do? Is it first in instilling confidence? Because there are those who are saying that this changing reins at this point in time might also send a signal to the international community. Do you exercise any fears in that regard?
Well, you know, I think, you know, to the extent of what we know about Mr. Oyedele, in my view, it brings confidence, actually. Because if you look at the public
confidence to the president.
Yeah, to the president and even to the system, because, Oyedele is somebody that is clearly, he understands the role of engaging the media, engaging the people. If you look at how he managed the tax reform, with all the storms, I think you have to give him credit. If anybody in government, my dear friends, if they understand how to manage the press, they understand 50% of the work. And that's what we even say about somebody that, we think is involved in a lot of political absurdities, like Wike knows how to manage the press, and that is a good thing. So Oyedele brings that to this cabinet, just like people like Pate and Alausa also do, and to let's extend the Interior Minister. Anybody who understands that the government has a role to play to communicate with people has a fair chance. That's number one. Number two, you have to also give him the fact that he is a brilliant, fiscal expert, without a doubt. And that's why I say I'm not surprised that the president, at this point, is saying that, look, I need to get this thing fixed. Let me follow this guy. He knows what he does. He inspires confidence. I will expect him to be able to sort out some of the problems that you have spoken about, in a more effective way. That is the expectation.
Well, President, listen to those two key people, tax people. Yeah. It means we Nigerians should brace ourselves.
Absolutely.
They want to tax the daylight out of us.
Because
we have our work cut out for us, we Nigerians.
We must also insist on performance and delivery.
So I believe Mr. Edele will come and answer that very soon. That belief that they're going to tax the daylight out of you.
That's it now, because if you are listening to those two key people, they are tax people now. So what they all they understand is tax.
Well, we're already out of time. I know Chairman is supposed. But what challenges do you really see in front of him? Very quickly, if you can enumerate that.
Well, of course, quite a few.
Apart from cynics like this man.
Quite a few. There are fiscal challenges clearly about how much of the targets, of the budget targets are being implemented, what is happening to revenue. Don't forget that there was a time when even Hedon had to say that we're not meeting revenue targets. So there are quite a lot. There are contractors that have not been paid. And I understand that, a lot of them have also spoken to the president and said that, look, what's going on here? So he really has his work cut out for him. What I think is going to be most challenging for him is the role as being the coordinating minister of the economy. Because now he's one of the newest members of the cabinet, and guess what? He's going to have to be the boss on the issue of the economy. So that will be an area that he really needs to sit up and gain the confidence, of the members of the cabinet in order to be able to deliver on that assignment.
So definitely they might give him an economist minister of state for finance.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the economy president. If not, I guess, maybe...
it will be difficult to raise the fact that they want to tax the whatever out of us. Because at the end of the day...
we have to pay taxes.
You're making money, Chamberlain.
Absolutely. And I think we have to pay taxes in this country. But, the reason why there is so much distrust is because people don't think that government resources are being expended prudently.
They don't see.
But the way we also get a little bit of voice is the fact that we pay taxes. If we pay taxes, then we can insist on accountability.
Of course, we have to keep asking that question. So they shouldn't, that's taken for granted. That we will ask, we should ask the living daylight out of them as well. If they're going to tax the living daylight out of us. Well, that wraps it up today of the program. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much.
We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain Asaf. Goodbye.
But the kind of tax Chamberlain is talking about is not the one where you ask people to pay permit for solar panels. That's not that type of tax, please. Thank you so much for watching today. I'm Yusuf. Have a good day. On top of the hour is Business Morning.